our fast-paced world, many of us struggle with overthinking and worry that leaves us feeling overwhelmed or stuck. In this podcast, we will hear stories of successful individuals and have conversations on ways to reach our true potential by embracing every micro detail of our identity, especially the flaws that make us unique. This is your host, Maria Grace Wolk. I'm a Filipino-American entrepreneur, psychotherapist, and mom of 2 boys. And my mission is to amplify diverse perspectives and experiences and inspire your journey to wellness and fulfillment. Hello, everyone. Today, I have the honor of having Christine Martinez-Suzukawa join me. Christine is a somatic-oriented and trauma-trained marriage and family therapist living in Hawaii and is licensed in both Hawaii and California. She is the daughter of an immigrant Mexican mother and is a transracial adoptee. Christine has worked with children and adolescents in public schools for over 20 years. She is also owner of Choice Point Psychotherapy. Christine, thank you so much for joining me today. Can you start us off by telling us your story?
Oh, well, hi, Grace. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I'm so happy to be here. I think you pretty much said it all. I also am a certified life coach, so that's something I'll be adding in the future to my business. But over here on Maui, and I enjoy working in an elementary school with all the young kids, and then I have a part-time private practice 2 nights a week.
I love it. I love it. In Maui, I'm so jealous.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. Tell us how you got to be where you are today.
In Maui?
Well, you said you lived in California and now you're in beautiful Maui. Not that California is not beautiful.
It's so interesting. I've just always had a soul calling to live in Hawaii. I didn't know where in particular, but ever since I was a teenager, I really wanted to live in Hawaii. So when I graduated from grad school, I moved here on my own and lived here for a few years. And then I got called back to the mainland and found my husband there. And then we both moved back to Maui together.
Nice. So, wait. So you moved to Maui. What do you mean you got called back?
I got called back like for family things. And then, I had to meet my husband. So I found him. It's a small island over here. So
yes. One of my favorites. I mean, have you always wanted to be a therapist? Tell us how you got to this profession.
Yeah, personal growth has been important to me ever since I was a teenager. I think struggling with my own mental health. I've always wanted to improve myself. I'm an adoptee and I struggled with identity issues, ever since I knew I was adopted. I never remember being told. I've always known. And my family, we're all adopted, all my siblings. They're all Mexican American and my parents are Mexican. My mom's from Mexico. My dad was born in the US and I was the only one who was not Mexican heritage. Culturally, I identify as Mexican because that's the culture I was raised in. But growing up, that's been part of my exploration. How do I identify myself culturally? I mean, people look at me and I'm white, but my experience and my family upbringing is not necessarily how I identify culturally.
Did you ask your parents your heritage, your cultural background?
Most adoptive parents back in the day, not a lot of information. So I knew my general heritage, but I always had a calling also to find out where I came from, what my true birth story was. And so I actually found both of my birth parents when I was in my early 20s. And I like to say I was conceived on the East and born in the West. So they're from the East Coast originally. I was conceived there. Then back in the 60s, kind of shameful to have a baby out of wedlock. So they moved to the West Coast where they had family and gave birth to me. And It was a foster family at first, but they later became my adoptive parents.
Do you remember how old you were when you were adopted?
I was placed with my adoptive parents. I was placed when I was like a few weeks old, and I was born with a birth defect, a cleft palate. So I actually wasn't formally adopted till I was about 5 years old due to needing various surgeries and insurance coverage and things like that. But I've always been with my same family from about 2 weeks old.
Okay. And then you've lived in California until you decided to move to Maui.
I actually lived in Japan as well.
Oh.
I also have ADD, so it's like my life feels so complex and there's so many layers. So, yeah, I moved to Japan when I was in my 30s and taught English in Japan for about 3 years and loved living there. Learned the language after I moved back, but I learned some of it while I was living there too. So I feel like part of my identity is feeling like I don't fit in anywhere growing up. Like I didn't feel like I quite fit in with my family. When I found my birth family, I didn't quite fit in there because I wasn't raised with the cousins and I was the East Coast and a whole different culture there. So I've been to many different places. I feel like by being different, part of my journey has been to embrace my differences rather than try to hide them or disown them. And so I think that also led me to therapy. I found a really good therapist and she really helped me, start to internalize the maternal. And yeah, so my journey has been really learning to fit in wherever I am rather than feeling like I don't belong.
Yeah, that must have been really hard.
I mean, since I always knew I was adopted, I never really questioned it. I just knew I was different from a different family, like all my siblings. Yeah, we're all adopted. So actually, my parents were also foster parents. So I grew up with a whole different set of siblings. A lot of my adopted siblings are older than me. So when I was growing up, my sister, who was about 7 years older than me, she was still living at home. But all my other siblings were foster siblings. So they would come and go.
Okay. So you've only been with one foster parent and the foster parent adopted you?
Yes. My mother and father. Yeah.
Okay. That's awesome.
Doing the family tree was a really difficult thing because the branches were always changing.
Wow. So you were having different siblings how often?
There were some siblings that stayed for a few years, then others came and went 6 months. There's actually 2 sets of siblings that stayed in our family their whole life, pretty much, but they were never adopted because they're Native American and that Native Americans don't allow for non-Native Americans to adopt their children.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But they've been with you all your life. Pretty much they're your siblings.
Yes.
Just not on paper or anything like formal documentation. Oh, okay. Have you gotten along with all of them?
Like any family, we have our ups and downs, but yeah, for the most part, yeah, we love each other. We get along.
Are there any ones that you like kind of stay in touch with or are you the closest to?
Well, out of those of us who are adopted, so I have 2 adopted sisters and 1 adopted brother. So my sisters and I were very close. So yes, we keep in touch.
Same age?
No, I'm the baby of the family.
You're the baby.
They don't let me forget that. I'm the spoiled one.
So where did you grow up in California exactly?
Oh, I'm from Oakland, California.
Oakland. Yay. I'm my neighbor.
Yeah. So I loved growing up in Oakland. I had a lot of diverse friends, ran track in high school. So I've been a lifelong runner.
You have been running. That's awesome.
Yeah. I feel really fortunate that I grew up on the West Coast versus the East Coast. I think West Coast, we definitely more open to diversity and different cultures, whereas my experience on the East Coast, I saw a lot of racism and people thinking, oh, you shouldn't interact with people from other cultures. So that was eye-opening to see the differences between the two coasts.
When did you live in the East Coast?
Oh, yeah. So I know my life.
I'm trying to create your timeline in my head, and I'm like,
I
wait.
know I should. So I was looking for my birth mother, actually, and she happened to still be in touch with my birth father. And so I found them, I think that was like 1986.
When did you decide you were going to try to find your birth parents?
Oh my gosh, I was in high school. Back in the day when they used to have phone books, when we used to get those sent to our home.
The big yellow ones?
Yeah, I would actually go through the white pages because I knew what I thought was my dad's last name. Well, my mom's last name turned out to be my dad's last name. So I would go through the phone book, and my best friend, Lena, and I, we would call all the different numbers, and
my gosh.
We'd ask my birthday. Does April 3rd mean anything to you? It was so funny. And then, so that was very unsuccessful because my family was from the East Coast, right? So they weren't even living in the Bay Area anymore. But then when I turned 21, I actually got a letter with both my birth mother and birth father's names. And I was going to college down in Fresno at the time, away from home. So I was my own private investigator, no Google or anything back then, no internet. I called someone who I knew would have more information, and she gave me some information, and I called a relative of my father's side. They were still in the Oakland phone book, still living in Oakland. And I said I was a friend of the family, and they told me that they had moved back to the East Coast.
Oh.
So then I called the Philadelphia operator and asked for all the people with my birth mother's last name and pretty much called them one by one. And she was like the second to the last person on the list.
Wow. So, and how many people did you end up calling? Do you remember?
I think it was around maybe 4 or 5. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. That's not so much than going through the entire white pages.
Yeah. I mean, last name was pretty common, but the first name, not so much. So unfortunately, she had actually gotten married, but never changed her maiden name. So like luck was on my side.
Okay. And so then what happened?
So she actually had named me because I wasn't adopted right away. I was like in foster care. So she actually came to visit me like once or twice. So my adoptive parents never changed my name. Okay. So when I said my name the second time, then she made the connection, and she was very happy to hear from me, very ecstatic. Oh. And so she came to visit me, and then I went to visit her. And my adoptive mom, she really did not want me to find my birth mom. She was insecure about not being my biological mom. So she asked me not to do it, but she also said, I knew you were so damn determined that you would do it. So she actually gave me her blessing to move over there and get to know her better. It was not easy, but that's how much she really loved me and wanted to make sure that I knew as much as I wanted to know. So I actually lived on the East Coast for 4 years, finished up my undergraduate school there at Temple University, and then moved back here to California, I should say. Then I moved to Japan shortly after that.
So when you moved to the East Coast, did you just live on your own, or did you live with your...
No, I lived with my birth mom.
Yeah. Your birth mom. Okay, so you got to spend some time with her. And you said you met your birth dad as well?
Yes, I met him and we had a relationship for a while. They were married to 2 different people.
Oh, okay. So you met them at separate times. And how was the meeting with your dad?
Yeah, my whole life, I never really thought about my dad. I think being a female, and I always thought about my birth mom as an adoptee. Sometimes we have that primal wound. Not everyone experiences this, but I definitely felt a deep longing for the maternal. And so I've always wanted to find my birth mom and hadn't really thought about my birth dad. So that was like a bonus, I guess, right? I got to have a relationship with both of them. And
Wow.
so my birth dad and I, we had a relationship for many years, but then his wife kind of grew jealous of our relationship and he had to choose between me or her, and he chose her, which I don't think
Wow.
anyone should have to make that decision, but that's the way that went down.
I am
Speechless.
speechless. Yes. I mean, I understand. I know you mentioned that you had experienced depression and even suicidal ideation around middle school, throughout high school. And would you say that this is probably the root cause of it? Or what can you tell us about that time of your life?
It definitely played a big factor. I think the fact of not feeling like I belong or fit in. I always look different. I got teased elementary school and middle school, like almost daily basis because my nose was different and it was bigger and kids are very cruel. So almost every day, I want to say I got teased about my nose.
That's awful.
Yeah. And even going to like an amusement park, I would stand in line and you know how those lines wrap around like Great America. And there would inevitably be a group of kids who would like notice my nose and then laugh at me and point. So yeah, hiding became a thing.
What do you mean hiding became a thing?
Hiding my nose, not wanting to be seen.
Okay. So you kind of isolated yourself, kind of retracted?
Not isolated per se, but like I was very shy growing up. And it was because it wasn't okay to be me. So I was very shy. If you ask my siblings, they're always like, oh, she's a shy one. I don't think people would say that about me now, although
I totally would not think that.
Right? So I've learned to come out of my shell. And that's what I mean. Transformation is very important to me because I see how I am. And if I want to change, then I push myself to change. I tell my clients, you know, you can do hard things. So of course, I make myself do hard things. Coming on your podcast was something I really wanted to do, but also pushing me out of my comfort zone.
And I'm so glad you decided to come.
Yeah. You asked about my depression. I think as adoptees, sometimes we feel like we don't have the right to be on this earth. Like birthdays, instead of being a happy occasion, can make us think about the time, can make us think about our birth. And if you're adopted, you go through birth trauma, the separation, right? The abandonment. So never quite feeling okay with myself and looking to others to be that maternal figure for me. And so through my own therapy, I learned to be that for myself. My therapist, she told me one day, she's like, yeah, I think I could hug you a long time and it still wouldn't be enough. Not that you need a hug. It's that you need to internalize the maternal part of you. And so I did that. And when I turned 40 years old, I decided I'm no longer going to waffle between life and death. Like when things would get hard, sometimes I would think, oh, maybe I should just end my life. Like, why should I be here? But I was turning 40 and I was going to be at a retreat with my existential humanistic psychotherapist group. What better place to claim and own your life? So I did that, bought myself a cake that said life begins at 40, and I haven't looked back since.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I'm so glad. I'm just curious what made the turn, what shifted?
I think learning suicide is usually a very permanent way out, but it's a coping mechanism, right? It's not a healthy one. It's not a good one. And so I think when life got tough, I would use that as my way out. I never wanted to die, but the pain just felt like too much. So I think through my own therapy, I learned like how to be with my emotions. I learned how to share my emotions with others. In my family, we didn't really talk about our feelings, and I was labeled as the sensitive one because I would get upset or cry. And I was taught like that it wasn't okay to have feelings. And through therapy, I learned that no, actually, it's very important to have feelings and it's okay to cry. It's okay to be angry. And so I just built my community and learned to talk to my friends about my emotions and to be more transparent. And went to a wonderful graduate school, John F. Kennedy, which is no longer, but their classes were very holistic and we had to learn about ourselves. So I like to say I got a graduate education in myself, my own life. And so the healing just continues. And even today,
Yeah.
so I make joy and gratitude a part of my daily life. Some people might say, oh, living in Hawaii, it's easy to be joyful, but there's a lot of unhappy people here in Hawaii. So it doesn't matter where you live. You can be unhappy in paradise, but I continually filled with awe with the beauty that surrounds me. I don't take it for granted. My husband, our zoo. Unfortunately, we weren't able to have kids, but we do have lots of animals. And so they're our Suzukawa, as we like to say it.
Oh, that's cute. What a story, Christine.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. I also consider myself a happiness researcher, and gratitude is the number one cause of happiness. So if I can communicate anything to your listeners is to really cultivate an attitude of gratitude. Find a gratitude partner. My good friend and I, we would email each other because we weren't living in the same place. At the end of the day, 3 things we were grateful for. And that really changed my outlook on life. Even when I have tough days, I can always see the good parts in it and feel blessed for what I have. I mean, of course, like everyone else, I look forward to vacations and traveling. And I also make sure I feel joy in the everyday experience.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think just even the thoughts of saying what you're grateful for and also knowing or even kind of reminding yourself why you're grateful for it is very powerful. I guess people can go into an auto mode and say, oh, I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful for my job, my home. And sometimes that becomes not as effective. But I think when you can reflect on why that's important to you, like why are you grateful for your family? Why is your home important? I think that really builds up the happiness within us. I love that you are now a happiness researcher and the transformation that happened within you. I'm sure that there are a lot of adoptees listening right now who I'm sure, have gone through the same experiences with the feeling of not belonging, having that abandonment issue growing up, and maybe they've gone through therapy, maybe they haven't. So I'm wondering if there is any advice you can give them, those who are still experiencing it and it's not through the tunnel yet.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is somehow find a way to love yourself and to not look for that outside of yourself. I know for me, I was looking for that maternal figure to feel that deep longing, sadness that I didn't think would ever go away. And it's amazing that when I try to get in touch with it, even now, I can't feel it anymore because I was fortunate to heal that part of my life. So if there's any adoptees listening, like learn to love yourself, become that internal parent that you're looking for outside and to own your life. I speak to a lot of adoptees whose birthdays don't bring them joy or happiness. And so I say, celebrate your life. Know that you are meant to be here. Claim your right to be here on this earth. So important. That's what I did when I turned 40, and it made a big difference to me.
I know one of the tips that you recommended to do is to have a gratitude practice. Are there any other tips and helpful exercises that they can do to practice self-love?
I think get support from other people. Don't isolate, to really build that community where you can be yourself. Like I said, I used to try and hide parts of myself. And one of the reasons why I wanted to be on your podcast was because you talk about owning the micro details of our lives. And I'm like, yeah, that's been my journey my whole life. So those parts that you want to disown, like somehow learn to bring them in and make them a part of yourselves because they're all important.
Yeah.
Even if there's shame around them, they're still important.
Right. It's acceptance. Oh,
And
that's so beautiful.
compassion too.
Compassion. Absolutely. Because when you have compassion for yourself, you have compassion for everyone else. So good to hear you talk about this. It's such a big transformation, transformed your way all around the world.
I know, I'm like a nomad.
What a way to find yourself, though, right?
Yes. And when we internalize the maternal, then we're always home wherever we go. So I think that allows me to maybe be away from my family. I am close to my family. And yet a lot of my life I've lived away from my family. So of course there's sadness about not seeing those everyday moments. And yeah, this is my journey. So I have to embrace it all.
So tell me about your practice on the island.
Oh yeah. So primarily work in the schools. I feel it's really important to get to people when they're young. So until I get tired of it, I plan to stay working with the elementary school students and help create change at that young age. And then I see adults in my private practice. So more than half my clients are adoptees. Somehow they found their way to me without
Yeah.
it.
Do you market yourself as?
I mentioned that, but that's a part of myself that I didn't really want to own. Like I didn't want to be known as the adoptee therapist, but through my client work, I realized, you know what, that is my niche and I'm going to own it. So that's going to be my new target
Amazing.
market. Yeah.
Because think about all those ones that are struggling, right? And they just don't want to find just a therapist, right? They want to find someone who understands what they're going through. And that is you, and how
Yeah.
healing that is for them.
I've come to realize that through my work with my clients who are adoptees that, oh yeah, not everyone understands this experience.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with me and my audience, and being really open and vulnerable with sharing your story.
Grace, yeah.
I think it's empowering, right, to have you here. And for those who are still struggling, hopefully they'll hear it and feel motivated that you can heal from these
Yes,
things.
you can. Yeah. So thank you for having me on and letting me share my story. And I feel empowered to go out and continue. Like I say, sometimes I try to hide myself away, but that's the habit part of me. And I'm going to stretch and grow and get out there more.
Yeah. Isn't it crazy though? This is exactly what they mean about like owning who you are, because the ones that you were so afraid of to start with, like you didn't want to even say that's part of you, but it's
Right.
really the most powerful thing right now that can help others. I mean, if because we're healers, right? And so
Right.
we understand the pain. And when you understand that pain so much, it becomes your superpower to
True.
help,
Yeah,
to
very
help
true.
others.
Yes.
I hope people find you. Definitely. So tell me where people can find you.
Okay. They can find me on Instagram at Christine Martinez-Suzukawa. I actually started TikTok. So the name of
That's right. I'm following you.
Yeah, I haven't done too much, but that's a goal. So my private practice name is Choice Point Psychotherapy. And so you can find me on TikTok at Choice Point Psychotherapy. And then I'm on LinkedIn under my name, Christine Martinez-Suzukawa, LMFT.
Love it. Anything else that maybe I missed out that you want to add?
Oh, I feel like we said so much. I think that's it. Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate.
Yeah. I just want to share with my listeners too that we attended a conference in at first Maui, right? But I don't think we met there, but we kind of learned about each other there. That's how we connected. But then we didn't really meet in person. But then the next conference, the
Big Island.
The Big Island, where we happened to, our rooms were right next to each other. And so we decided.
I was determined to run with you after.
Yes, that's right. I was so glad I had a running partner on the Big Island. Christine was my running partner on the Big Island while we were on a therapist conference. And it was just nice to have someone run with and chat with and get to know. And such a fun, we've had great conversations. And even though we're half awake, but it was just nice to just have you there as my running buddy. And
so fun. I really enjoy getting to know you better. And yeah, that's another thing, like inviting myself to, hey, let's go run.
Yes. I was like, yes, of course. And then turns out we have mutual friends, and it's such a small world. We lived almost near each other. I'm sure we've went to the same places at the same time. It's just crazy, right? Like we would never have known that our relationship is so close. I mean, our connection, we're so connected.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in Pleasanton, so I'm sure our
Yes.
paths probably crossed or something.
I'm sure we have. I'm sure we've been in a race together too. I bet,
yeah,
right?
probably. Yeah.
So crazy. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to having more runs with Christine the next conference we go to, hopefully soon. Maybe I'll visit her in Maui and hopefully we'll meet up here when you visit. But
you're always welcome to come visit in Maui, and I will definitely be back in the Bay Area.
Yes, can't wait. But thank you again for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. It was an honor and a privilege to be on here. And I love your podcast and the message you send out to the world.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you. If you resonate at all with the stories on this podcast and you're thinking about a change in your current situation, in your career, in your relationship, or maybe even in yourself, what's holding you back from taking the first step? Find out by taking the What's Your Biggest Self-Sabotage quiz that you can find on my website at mariagracewolk.com. Until next time, stay kind and own your journey. Thank you again for your time today. If you enjoy this podcast, please be sure to hit subscribe, rate, and review. I would so appreciate it. The high rate and reviews will help others find the podcast so we can amplify, normalize, and break the mental health stigma. This podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regards to the subject matter covered. This is given with the understanding that neither the host or the guest are providing legal, mental health, or other professional information. If you need a professional, you should find one. This podcast does not substitute for personal professional services.